Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome to another video. Today I'll be bringing you a complete list of the easy champions for new players to learn in the top lane. All of the champions mentioned in this video are really effective in that top lane and are great starter champions for new players. I will also be showing the champion's difficulty as well. This will be on a scale from 1 to 10, and of course you will see that in the top left as we go through the video. Also, if you guys do enjoy the video, please make sure you like and subscribe as well, because I will have a lot more content coming out like this in the future. So for the first champion on the list, we've got Garen. He's going to be the only champion on the list with a difficulty rating of 1 because he is relatively easy to play, and of course he is pretty effective. To play Garen, there's not a whole lot to him. You use your Q to engage onto the enemy and silence them, activate your E for its damage, and when they are low, use your ultimate to execute them. Of course, then you also have your W as a defensive as well, so when damage starts coming into you, you can activate it and become a lot tankier. If you're looking for a tanky bruiser that also dishes out some nice damage and is a great lane bully, then Garen may be for you. Next, we've got some difficulty 2 champions, and first up is Volibear. Volibear is a champion you'll see in the jungle a lot as well, but in that top lane he's also a really strong lane bully like Garen. You'll be able to engage onto an enemy with your Q ability and flip them over your shoulders, and when you get there, use your E ability to slow them, and activate your W when you have enough stacks to do a big portion of damage. You'll then also have your ultimate to activate as well to increase your damage even further. None of Volibear's activated abilities are defensives, however his passive is pretty strong. When you do dip on a low health pool, you will regenerate 30% of your maximum health over 6 seconds, which can give you a ton of survivability. He is a champion that's fairly kiteable, but against those champions that don't have a lot of mobility, he can be a very effective pick. For the next champion on our list, we've got Malphite. Malphite's a really strong champion for new players because some of his damage scales off of his armor. Since most of the champions you'll be against in that top lane will deal physical damage, you'll take pretty much no damage from them with all the armor you're stacking, and you'll also do some pretty good damage. He's also a pretty versatile pick as well, because if you do start snowballing, you could always go for a high AP build as well and just one-shot squishy targets in the backline. He's a very easy champion to learn that's also extremely rewarding as well if you can knock up multiple targets with your ultimate. Next up, we've got Pantheon. Pantheon is another really strong lane bully that's fairly easy to play and execute. All you have to do throughout the lane phase is poke your enemy over and over again with your Q ability, and when they are low enough, go for an all-in with your W and your E. This does come at a cost, however, because Pantheon doesn't have the best late game out there, but if you want a very strong early game and just to bully your opponent, then you probably want to pick up something like Pantheon. He is a champion that's best used by a player that is somewhat aggressive and likes to trade, because you have to be trading a lot throughout the lane phase to get an advantage because you're not the best late. Next, we have Dr. Mundo. Mundo's kind of the opposite of Pantheon because he starts off relatively weak, but in the later stages of the game, it's very hard to bring down a Mundo, and he does pretty decent damage. If you are in a really rough matchup, however, it is pretty easy to farm on Mundo still because you can just spam your cleaver over and over again and last hit minions. As long as you're somebody that doesn't mind playing passively in the early game just to become a monster in the late game, then Mundo might be the champion for you. Just make sure you itemize properly against your lane opponents so you can become really tanky so they can't kill you any longer, and you can just outlast them and kill them instead. Now we're going to move on to some difficulty 3 champions, and first here is Tryndamere. Tryndamere is a fairly easy champion to play because he is very auto-attack reliant, however he does have some pretty hard matchups which will take some time to figure out. He is a pretty nice champion in that top lane, however, because his split push is insane and last hitting's really easy as well because your auto-attacks hit really hard. You will be able to activate your Q ability for some nice sustain, and you can either engage or disengage with your E ability and slow people or reduce their attack damage with your W. Then of course you have your great ultimate, which stops you from dying for a couple seconds, which is pretty nice to have on a new player because it makes him somewhat forgiving. Next up, we've got Maokai. He's not a very common pick in the meta at the moment, but he does bring a lot of crowd control, some great sustain, and some okay damage. You'll end up going for a pretty tanky build as well, so you won't take a lot of damage, and any you do, you can usually sustain fine with your passive. The strength of Maokai, however, lies in his AoE teamfighting ultimate. He has the potential to root an entire enemy team in a team fight, which of course has the potential to be devastating. That's pretty much what your job is on Maokai, root the enemies as much as possible while sustaining and dealing a little bit of damage. Coming in next, we've got Nasus. Nasus is a champion with a really simple kit, however he is pretty reliant on farm, which puts him into the 3 difficulty range. You will have to focus on last hitting minions with your Q ability throughout the lane phase to empower that ability so it deals damage in the mid and late game. If you can stack this ability up, it has the potential to do some insane damage, and it becomes even more spammable while in your ultimate. To play Nasus, all you have to do is basically just farm your Q ability. When you are going for fights, activate your ultimate, and use your W as a slow, and E to add a little bit of damage and reduce armor. Next here, we've got Sion. Sion's a champion that's naturally very tanky, that also has a shielding ability, and he's very hard to bring down. Even if you do finally manage to bring down a Sion, he will come back to life for a bit with his passive and has the ability to kill you anyways. He's also got a really nice slow from his E ability and a really nice knockup from his Q ability, so he does bring a nice chunk of crowd control into the team. Then of course he's also got his ultimate as well, which is great for going for all ends, or he can just use it to roam around the map and help his teammates as well. Although he is incredibly tanky, he also dishes out some surprisingly high damage as well, so he is an all-around great pick in the top lane. Next up is ChoGath. ChoGath is another champion that's naturally tanky as well because he gets some really nice stacking health from his ultimate. That means even if ChoGath is going for a fairly high damage build, he'll still be naturally tanky and have a really high health pool. Usually, however, ChoGath will also go for a tanky build as well, which will make him incredibly hard to bring down. He is somewhat skill shot reliant, however, which does give him his 3 difficulty rating, but even in new players' hands, he does have the potential to be a very strong champion. Even if you do struggle at landing your Q ability, as long as you can go in there and silence targets while feasting on low health ones, you'll be pretty good. Next here is the most annoying champion on the list, Teemo. Teemo's a champion that's pretty strong even in a new player's hands because of course he is ranged and he is a lane bully. So pretty much all you need to do throughout the lane phase is keep range on your target and try to poke them down with your E's added damage. If a champion does manage to jump on top of you, you simply blind them to take no damage because their auto attacks cannot hit you. You then also have your ultimate as well, which is great to drop through the river because it will do a lot of damage to the enemy jungler if they're trying to gank you. This is pretty nice for a new player because if you don't have the best map awareness out there, the enemy jungler doesn't like to gank too often because they don't want to run through a bunch of shrooms. If they are placed correctly, they'll take out pretty much all of the jungler's health pool, and it's not really worth ganking because you should be able to see them coming on the minimap even with bad map awareness. Next up, we've got Heimerdinger, aka the Donger. Now, although he is a pretty skill shot reliant champion, he still makes it onto this list with a 3 difficulty rating because he is a really strong lane bully and his turrets are very hard for a lot of champions to deal with. Because of this, even if you are missing your skill shots, a lot of champions can't really engage into a Heimerdinger because they will just get shredded by your turrets anyways. As you do learn how to land your grenade and your rockets a lot more often, of course you will become a much stronger lane bully. You will be able to put a lot of pressure on the enemy team, and it's really hard to stop a Heimerdinger from taking your turrets if he is ahead. Next up, we've got Poppy. Poppy's a really nice champion because she has a really strong stunning ability with her heroic charge, which can do a ton of burst damage when comboed with her hammer shock. She of course is a very tanky champion at the same time, so she is yet again one of those champions that's very tanky in the lane phase that also does some pretty damn good damage. She can get a really nice shield from her passive, which is great at trading, and she gets some really nice extra resistances from her W, Steadfast Presence. This can also be activated for bonus movement speed, which will also knock down enemies that dash when inside it, so it's great against mobile champions that like to dash a lot. She also has the ability to knock people out of the fight with her ultimate as well, giving her team a big advantage because if you can split up that team fight, you of course are going to probably win it. She is a pretty strong champion, and with just a little bit of practice, you can definitely be an effective Poppy. Next, moving on, we've got Darius. Darius is one of the best lane bullies out there because if he can stack his bleed over and over again on the enemy champion, they will take a lot of damage over time and it's very hard to deal with. When he gets 5 stacks of bleed on an enemy, he will receive a buff, and at that point, it's almost impossible to trade with him. He will therefore be a champion that's best on an aggressive player that likes to trade a lot because that's what you have to do to take control of the lane. The best part about Darius, however, is his executing ultimate. This will give you some insanely high snowball potential, and even if you do get ganked by the jungler, if you are ahead, sometimes you can just kill both. Now we move into our difficulty 4 champions, starting with Shen. Shen is a champion that doesn't have the hardest kit out there, however you do have to have some pretty solid map awareness because of your ultimate. This will shield an ally and also bring you to the target, so you have to kind of keep track of where your allies are on the map and also how high their health pool is. A Shen has the potential to influence the game a lot, but if you're missing a lot of opportunities to use your ultimate, you're not going to be that strong of a champion. You are a champion that's very tanky that has a taunt, so you want to try to taunt those squishy targets in the backline onto you while your teammates follow up and try to get off their damage. You are able to block attacks as well wherever your sword is positioned, so position around the team fight and block attacks whenever you're able to. Next up, we've got Renekton. Renekton's a very strong early game champion, so you want to try to abuse that as much as you can because you are a champion that falls off in the late game, kind of just like a Pantheon. So because of this, Renekton's usually best when found in the hands of an aggressive player. You want to be engaging and trading as often as you can in the majority of matchups because you will usually win those trades and you want to try to get an advantage. Once you do get your advantage, you can either sit in your lane and try to take down towers and snowball that way, or you can roam around the map and help other lanes, or of course just group with your team and take objectives. His abilities work different when empowered, and he does have a fair number of hard matchups, which is why he's got that 4 difficulty rating. Next up, we've got Singed. Singed is a relatively easy champion because you kind of just activate your Q and then run around and try to flip targets, but it's more so what you have to do in the game that gives you your 4 difficulty rating. The newer players might not understand what proxy farming is and how to roam around the map and influence lanes after you shove the lane and proxied. You will, however, be a champion that's got some okay damage and a really solid engage as well. All you have to do is throw out your W for a slow, activate your ultimate for its movement speed, and try to run at a target and flip them into your team so they can delete them. He is a pretty fun and trolly pick, and once you do learn how to proxy farm and roam around the map, you can be a very, very effective champion. Illaoi is another champion great in new players' hands. You are somewhat skill shot reliant because you have to land your E and your Q ability, but even in the team fights, as long as you can just hit your R key, you have the potential to do some insane damage. All you really have to do is pull in the target spirit with your E ability and hit both them and the spirit at the same time with your Q to do a nice chunk of damage. Your W is then great at jumping onto targets as an engage, and your ultimate, well, is just incredible in teamfights. In those clumped up 5-mans, all you have to do is jump in the middle, hit R, and watch your tentacles do the rest. She is a pretty fun and viable champion, and definitely one worth learning for a new player. Next up would be Yorick. Yorick is another nice champion for a new player because you are relatively tanky and also dish out the damage. You'll be able to lock the target in an area with your W and then hit your morning mist to make your ghouls jump on top of the target and dish out a lot of damage. You've then got your Q ability, which will help spawn these ghouls as well and also gives you some really solid lane sustain. Then there is the fact that Yorick is one of the best split pushers out there. Your ultimate will summon Maiden of the Mist, which is a pretty strong minion that is great at pushing lanes with you and taking down towers. Therefore, even if you're not the best team fighter out there and you don't have the greatest mechanics, sometimes you can just split push to win and you don't even have to fight too much. And next up, we've got Urgot. Urgot is another really strong lane bully that even bullies a lot of the lane bullies out there because he is ranged and is very, very tanky and deals a lot of damage. You are a fairly skill shot reliant champion, however, and the E must be landed as you're engaged, so you do get that 4 difficulty rating. Once you do learn how to land your E and your Q ability, you can simply activate your W afterwards and dish out a lot of damage on the enemy champion and pretty much take none in return because you do have a shield. Since you are such a strong early and mid-game champion, you have to take full advantage of that and try to get a lane early on because, of course, you do fall off later. You do have the potential to snowball the game, however, and end it way before it even reaches late game. And last but not least, we've got Mordekaiser. He's a champion that's just made it back into the meta because he's incredibly strong now. He dishes out a ton of damage while also having some pretty solid sustain, so it's hard to push a Mord even out of the lane. If you can combo your abilities together effectively and you have some items, you can pretty much 100-0 the majority of champions out there unless they are very, very tanky. You will want to roam around the map as well on Mordekaiser because you do want to group for dragons and get those because you will get a Ghost of the Dragon, which makes your pushing even stronger. You are a pretty immobile champion, however, so be careful of that, but you are very, very strong. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the complete list of easy champions for new top lane players. If you guys did enjoy the video, please make sure you like and subscribe because I will be doing these for other lanes and of course the jungle and the support role. If you feel like I left any champions out of this list or any of the champions I mentioned are harder than I said, please let me know down in the comments below. But other than that, thank you guys so much for checking out the video. I really do appreciate it and have a great new year. But other than that, take it easy, have a good day, and peace.